Well, I'm gonna share. Have you?
I mean, what are sandwiches?
Just me like practice like the recording for sharing. Okay, let me.
And which is a variety of selling taco. A&A's is like American salsa.
Depends on how far away from your nearest urban area you get.
Slack the two. So put 5 minutes on. And then this recording is they will share. Should live me guys. Search up. I use markedly fireballs from
I was like, well, we're no longer
the island. I think I'm like, oh, you think I might answer that? If you want to share. All right, well, you may want to audio. Okay. Now, for now, it is funny sentences, so
Yeah.
we got a couple.
Yeah.
So many. One of those is all veggie, but so
The whole
tray stuff looks like me does not make sense. Which one?
I think it's this one. The one I think is definitely.
That's what meat. These are all vegan. So
Okay.
because I don't eat meat, I'm for food, so I got the tray of vegetarians unite. They're pretty good. You don't have whatever you want. There's tons of balls.
No, it's fine. I'm just letting everybody else.
Thanks again. We'll get it started here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. All right. And we'll wait for time to set up so we can.
Fine. You're good.
Very good. So whatever. We'll fix it all in post. Okay, thanks for coming. It is May the 5th, so May the 5th be with you. It's Taco Tuesday. It's for Mayo. Not having those which I explained earlier because I'm not going to put crowds. I apologize. Thank you for being here. Nonetheless, a kind of not. We don't really use the microphones here. There are no one on the recordings. They're not going to hear whispers. I don't know how good is streaming. It may or may not be whispers. So this is a bit. Yeah, this like you probably still should whisper during this paper. If you want to speak, honestly, I never look. No one's so basically people call. If you want to speak, go to Slack. Go to Boise10.10. Join the Slack.
Keep a call source for the.
Yeah. So like, just hit us up. I'm gonna just hit us up there. We're still working our way through all of the standard there with another one today. We've got Rando next month, which is really, really cool. So I'm excited to hear that. And on the Go channel in Slack, a Canvas Slack's kind of wiki system. And we're just marking them off as we go. So there's still tons of stuff out there. If you want to speak, even if you don't, if you have deep knowledge of the standard packages, or If you don't have one excuse to get deep knowledge on any of them, your stuff's really good. I'm just, I think like logs still, and like there's some fundamentals still out there to cover. So it doesn't have to be one of the complex packages, like random. So if you want to speak, just go to Slack. If you want to speak, we will figure out something to talk about to see what hooked up. Typically the standard talks here really go well. So there is a job channel, so that's the place to go. And they're still, despite everything else that's going on, we're still getting decent feed of job postings. So that's a place to go if you're looking for a job. Point that one out.
If your company's hiring, please post a job there.
Yes, please do post a job there. It's just like a platform that you go through and fill it out. Get a posting on there. Thank you, we've by posting us here by Scoot, and always kind of plug here because speaking of places that are hiring, we have U.S. hires for senior engineers, but we have several tracks for senior engineers doing. I don't remember what so that there are like we have tech jobs. That's essentially one of the things that Weave gets out of posting this. So go check us out. It's a pretty great place to work. And that's on me. I'm gonna hand it off. Obviously we're covering HTML template and going beyond. So we're not. It's a good example. We're not paper rigid. It go outside the standard lib. It's on a touch point. All of these packages. So we're gonna start standard HTML template and then go to paper package that kind of solves those other problems. Thanks, Steve. I'll let you take it from here. Set up prop production.
Sorry,
No, I don't want to up here.
I'm playing.
Hold on. That's on my phone, please. Yeah, so I want to talk about the HTML template package. I got Gemini to give me this fun image of the gopher building some HTML the hard way. But to get started, I want to talk about why server-side rendering in 2026. This isn't quite as hot button topic, because even React junkies have caught on that's rendering some stuff on the server is a good idea, and it's faster and more efficient. But with Go, we don't really have another option unless you really want to get fancy with some WASM tricks. So reasons to generate your HTML on the server are it's fast. But my favorite reason is it's right next to where your data is. So it's a lot easier to be up to date with whatever state you're managing and keep things consistent. You don't have to deal with the concept of the client has some state, server has some state, and at some point you have to sync the two. You just have it in one place. And the final reason it always comes up is it's good for search engines. They like it when they hit your domain and they get all the content to look at easy peasy and they don't have to run JavaScript. Golang actually gives us two template engines, one that's built on the other. So there is a more basic text template engine, which is handy for all kinds of things. If you wanted to generate a YAML file or just a text document or whatever you want to do, it's great. It basically follows the exact same stuff I'm going to show you here, except for the main benefit that HTML template gives you, which is security through escaping. Because we don't trust our pesky users. We don't know if they're someone doing what they're supposed to, or if they're trying to inject stuff on our site for some cross-site scripting vulnerability. And that is the main thing HTML template gives you.
Finish your sentence, or?
No, you
Oh, okay. So yeah, I was just kind of curious about saying rendering HTML on the server end. What does that mean? I haven't worked very much with front end stuff. I mean, I have enough to have like a working knowledge, but like, what does it mean that we're rendering? Like, what gets set over?
So with Go, we're writing a Go program that lives on a server. We're not sending our Go code to the user that's visiting our website. What the user wants from their browser is just HTML, probably with some CSS and JavaScript. In a lot of apps today, they're sending this giant bundle of JavaScript, and when it gets to the page, it starts generating HTML in the browser. This
Oh,
is frameworks like React and Vue and Svelte. That's how those all operate. Mostly. It gets a bit fuzzy these days. What we're doing is our Go app on the server is writing out text as HTML and sending that over the wire. That's why we're calling it server rendering, because the server renders HTML and that gets sent over the wire to the user's browser.
Basically what we used to do with like PHP all the time.
This is what all server-side languages do. PHP, Ruby, Java. Pick what you want. Particularly in the world before JavaScript got as powerful as it is, you were always sending HTML over the wire generated on the server. In some cases, you may have pre-generated it, like a static site of some kind, but often we want to dynamically serve something for our user, their specific content. So we're generating that and sending it to them.
thanks, I appreciate it.
And then because it's content that's specific to the user may have been naughty and tried to get us to render something for some, what I mean by cross-site scripting vulnerability. They're trying to run JavaScript on our page to do something the user wouldn't actually want them to do. Everything from as silly as mine crypto to steal their information or try and log into their bank. So HTML template is nice because it automatically assumes that it should protect what we're doing so that any strings we're trying to render into it, it will not just let be HTML, it will escape them. So usually what you see is the HTML entities for the angle brackets, like ampersand, LT, colon, whatever it is, in place of angle bracket. So the standard workflow for how we work with it is you define templates using standard HTML and the specific tags and syntax it has for working with it. Then you parse it, load it from the file system. Then there's must calls in the template package because you want to know if your template is invalid and fails to parse. So it'll usually just blow up and you need to deal with that as some kind of panic. Or no, it'll give you an error. But usually I just take it and panic because if I can't parse my HTML, my app is pretty broken. And then you are given a template that you can pass data to that it will then be able to render into the template. It will make more sense with an example. And one thing you'll always want to do with templates is when you get a request, you don't want to compile or parse your template, then run it every time. We always parse and hold on to that. So it's significantly faster because that parse step is the slowest part of this process. Or the package I'm going to get to in the towards the end of this talk, you do it all ahead of time, just because it is an expensive step. So I think I'm going to break out of this and go to some code. That will be easy. So here is a template. So I have this in the layout directory of this app. And you see the bulk of this is just HTML. We have our doc type, our HTML tag. We have our head with some basic stuff there. Our body is HTML. So then you start to see these mustache syntax, which is used by all kinds of template engines. probably seen this before, using curly braces or double curly braces to insert stuff. It's fairly common. But with HTML template files, you're usually writing inside of one of three blocks. There's a define block, like this one, or yeah, you define it and you give it a name. And then you're able to use these as partials to compose the final HTML that you want. Because most of the time, there's a lot of your HTML that's similar. You have headers and footers and sidebars and whatever. That's the same on every page. And you don't want to have to rewrite that all over the place. So by using define, you create chunks of HTML that you can reuse where you need to. So in my example here, I have a layout that's application.html, and it has a block content. And so this is where the main chunk of the page gets rendered. So I made a little recipe app just to demo some of this. So it rendered a whole page worth of HTML, but there are little chunks in here that built this page. And so that's used by defining blocks and fitting them together. So then there's code that's required to actually stitch all this together and make it work. For performance, I tend to embed these. This is probably a separate standard library doc, as embedding has its own quirks and things, but Go gives you the ability to put files that aren't your code in the binary. So essentially I'm slurping up all my HTML templates and bringing them with all my code. It just makes it faster to run.
Easier to distribute too.
And much easier to distribute because you don't have to then ship your HTML templates and your Go binary. It's just all together.
You don't have to worry about, oh, did I update that on the server or on my local or whatever? No, just run the Go.
Yeah, it prevents a lot of stupid mistakes.
We like things that prevent stupid mistakes. Or we are stupid.
So the framework I'm using for the web framework I'm using for this is called Echo, and it has interface that I can match to make rendering HTML easier. So I'm doing that with a render struct that when it is new, I create this map where I store all my templates. So this is what I was describing before, where you want to parse your templates and hold on to them, because then they're much faster to execute. So then here is where template actually starts to be used. So I'm creating a new template called base. And for this base, I'm getting into the next feature I want to talk about, which is a func map. It's usually you want to do more than just render strings in your template, or you want to make it easier, like you can pass dates to your template and then render them all in a standard way you expect to do. So instead of just provide all of these functions in the template library and make it huge, Go gives you the ability to create what it calls a func map, which is a map of functions. It's well named. And they operate as helper functions you use inside your template that you can use on whatever data you have there. So then,
Is it basically just like the name of the function is the key? And then the value is just a pointer to?
let's see, where did I pull that?
I think it's a map so that you can choose the
name versus the actual function.
Yeah, so the name is like, is the way you invoke it in the templates, and the value is the function itself.
Yeah.
And the type isn't any, but it has like 3 or 4 different forms of like function that will work when you pass it there.
Yeah, it's with templates, it can be a little bit harder to not use any in a lot of places. Which I'll get to later, a way to get around that with a different library. But here is an example of it building my func map. So it is an actual type from the template package, and I'm giving it a name as key and the function that I want to use for that. So then I have that template that I created, parse my directories. And so it'll just chug through there and read those files. So it's pulling in stuff from layouts and components. So I have those essentially as directories of templates of those partials I was talking about that I want available everywhere else I might be using a page. So my individual page templates are being rendered here, or are being parsed here. Just the bits I want accessible everywhere. Then the next bit goes through those pages. This is doing file system stuff. And then as I iterate over those pages, I clone the base, which had those, the layout and reusable components in it. So I don't have to parse those over and over and over again for every page that I have. And then what I had in my presentation there is it goes through and here tries to parse each page so that it's available, and then I set it in my map so that I can access all of these pre-parsed templates when I need to render HTML for a route. And next page, data binding and control logic. That'll be easier, just showing code. Okay. So if you want a control flow, often just if, you can just use an if inside curly braces. This isn't exactly like just writing Go code. Because it's not like you're writing a full expression of Go there. You have the context that was passed to this. So if I go here, so I am rendering the home index template and I am passing it a map that has recipes in it. So this is the context being passed to my template. So those are the values I have access to. Those are what I can use where if they exist. So this if will work if this value is true and if it is not nil. Because I think
It's falsy.
it's more like a truthy falsy
Yeah.
and less of a true Boolean check.
It will, yeah, handle empty strings as false. Like it's very like kind of outside the norm, honestly, for Go.
Yes.
For the template language to be like, yeah, our if statements and templates are falsy, but it must just work, must just be so much more useful in templates than we think. Right?
Yeah, like if you're
Yeah,
used to a Python or a Ruby, this is kind of more how their ifs and control stuff
It must-
work. In Go, this feels weird, but it just works most of the time and you run with it.
There are ways to do more explicit, like non-falsy checks, right? There's like the equals or whatever where you can compare, but it's a lot more text to say if dot equal empty string than just if thing.
Yeah. And sometimes if I want something really precise, I make sure that is in the context ahead of time that I pass to the template. So if I really need to know if a Boolean is true or false and it gets kind of complicated, I will do that in my handler. And there will be has or an is.
I think even your current example here, which is calling has current user, is a great example of
Mhm.
that. If you could probably do that has current user work inside an if statement in the template, but it'd be so much worse than just offloading it to a function when it's time.
Yes. Yeah, so that's control flow. And then you can see for inserting a value, it's just the current, the curly brackets and a value that's in here. This is slightly redundant, but I did it just as an example. You can define specific values to make it easier to understand what you're working with from your context. So current user is an actual value I have in the context for this template that I could use. But using this current user dot and setting it equal to $ current user works as defining a variable that I can use. I found I don't actually. It can be more helpful inside of a loop where you want to specifically name the thing or attribute or attributes of the thing that you're working with. But it's a handy tool that's there. I don't know that you'll use it a ton. And then here, the block one is more for rendering a whole template. So let's see. Oh, that's iteration. Let's open template. So
Sorry, if you want me to ask questions at the end, I can, or.
no, we can do it. We're gonna get into something quite different towards the end. So
Okay.
I'm on my way, Eric.
Yeah, so, like, was there a struct that is defined that you passed in, like, where did current user come from?
So
Where did that boolean come from?
you can just pass a struct as the context of the template. I should make that a little bit more obvious. That'd be easier to open. Template. Yeah, here. I have echo. Let's do this. I'll just show you the way I do it here. So this calls it under the hood, but this render function comes from echo, but it basically passes this straight along. So I have this template and it gets this data. You can define a struct and just pass a struct. In almost every case I've seen and best practices, this is often a map just because it's so much easier to deal with for you to add stuff to. And that is the context or the what variables are available locally to the template that you can use. So the keys of that map become variables that exist in the template. You can also access the map directly just by using dot as a key, I guess. It gets a little loosey-goosey, but usually it's just a map and that's where those values come from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so is the has current user, is that in recipes?
That's the function call.
That is a.
So, that one I actually inject because it can't be in the funct map because it is unique to each request. So for information that you want that's unique to each request, you need to make sure you put in the context, because like func map and all of that is like app initialization when the template's created. So I don't know what the current user of the 800th request is going to be, so I can't put that in there. So in here, when this render is called, I go through and I have echo context, which is where information about the request is stored for this framework. So I'm able to come in here. I do a check if it's a map, but that's just because I'm being pedantic. I always use a map. And then I add to this view context here these different functions. So this is where I have a key to always tell if this is an HTMX, because I have that set up on this app. Reverse is a function from Echo that lets me do a reverse lookup of a route if I want. But the main thing you're asking a question here is, where does the current user come from? That's because I'm looking up current user and adding it to the context. And I'm having to do that in this render call because I only know that information when I'm rendering for a route.
Cool. So I'm sorry. Well, the func map is only for really the template parsing part.
It's for more generic operations you might want to do, like you might want a custom truncate function that can take a large chunk of text and will cut it down exactly how you need it, or date formatting, or operations like that you might want to do over and over and over again, but that aren't specific to a request. If it's specific to a request, it needs to be passed to the template when that request is happening.
So you can't actually have dynamic functions, so when you define your template, it's got all your calls in it. You got your func map and you say, okay, parse the template with this func map known. And if it comes across you trying to invoke a function in the template that wasn't in the func map you gave it, it'll like say this is an invalid template. Okay, so when you have that dynamic data like he's got, that all like the functions are all static. Like once you've built that template, say parse this text with this set of available functions, like that's set. But then you can call those functions with individual data each time you like, okay, you've got a template now, render the template with this data. Okay, now render the template with this data. So those functions can have, however you want, you can build the dynamic input to those functions each time you invoke the template.
Thank you.
So the next thing I was just going to show is, it's kind of weird with templates because sometimes it looks like Go, it just doesn't really feel or work like Go. It's like a juicy, scripty kind of Go. So like you have to change, so you'll iterate over something like you're used to. You just don't need to have something that assigns to it. The templates have this idea of a block. So this end down here ends this range block. And then the thing that can get a little weird is this dot. Now, instead of being the global context that was passed to this template, dot now represents each thing that you are iterating over in this range call. So dot here is now the individual recipes I'm iterating over as I'm rendering them, not the global context that I'm using.
It's like scope limited global context of the scope, basically.
So now here's an example of using one of those helper functions with this pipe syntax that templates have. You can think about it kind of like Unix pipes, where the thing from the left-hand side goes into the first argument of the thing on the right-hand side. So this is essentially saying render description here, pass it to default text, and all default text does is if this is nil or empty, it puts this out instead.
is a sort of a wild thing when you first see it. You're like, wait, where's the other argument? Because if you look at the function definition for default text, it's going to say it takes 2 string arguments.
Mhm.
We go look at the way it's used. You could rewrite that and explicitly send it 2 string arguments and it would work. But that pipe syntax, this is like a pure sugar, like syntactic thing to make templates just read cleaner. Right?
It's clean, it's pretty, but it's another one of those things where templates don't always feel like go.
Yeah.
It's weird scripty land. That's still it. And I think that's about all. Yes, and then I wanted to talk about best practices with Temple. So I talked about embedding your templates so that your templates are read from the binary is much more performant, makes it easier to distribute. Error handling. Let's see here. So here I am executing functions. It doesn't show it here because Echo handles this under the hood, but it is rendering it to a bytes buffer, and then that bytes buffer is written to the response. Because what you want to do is see if there's an error while rendering your template. It may be an error because you didn't expect something to be nil, you didn't expect that data to be there, whatever it is. But you don't want the old school PHP problem of it'll start rendering and then somewhere halfway down the page, it just stops because the rest of the HTML didn't show up because there was an error. So when you render to a bytes buffer and then write that out when it succeeds properly, you're able to then instead give the user a proper 500 error, however you need to handle it, instead of a half rendered page of HTML. Okay. These. Now I want to switch to talking about a completely different library, because HTML template is wonderful and significantly better than a lot of languages have as a baked-in HTML templating library thing. But as I've equivocated about a bit while talking about it, it has some weirdness. It has some rough edges that are mostly fine once you just learn them and it becomes pretty intuitive. But some people have written some other options. And so this is one of them called Temple. So it is a shift in the way you're thinking about writing the templates, because this image here on the left looks a lot like Go, but instead of func, I use the word temple. And so temple lets you write things that look like Go functions with HTML in it. It gives you the same kind of ick as like JSX first did with JavaScript. It's very, very much along the same vein. But just like how JSX gave React some powers, and once you got used to it, is pretty intuitive. This lets you write more Go-ish code to output HTML. This, of course, can't be compiled by the Go compiler, so there is a generation step. So where in HTML template, I talked about a parsing step where it had to read in those files, parse them, and then they were prepared to be rendered as HTML. Instead, with Temple, there's a code generation step you need to run before you build, where it builds these into a Go file that looks mildly horrifying because of all the hoops it jumps through to make a string concatenation fast. But it does make it fast. In most cases, it is faster than HTML template. Yeah.
Is this mostly focused around HTML or would it also work with text?
HTML.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be handy if it was a little bit more flexible, but it really needs you. I guess you could probably just try not having angle brackets anywhere and see what happens, or like just do a div and strip it later and see what works. But it's
meant
focused
for
on HTML.
It's probably escaping name, just like text HTML template wouldn't go. Like that name is nice and safe, and if you have angle brackets in there, they can escape.
And also borrowing from those JavaScript frameworks, it can now be a bit more componenty. So you can see here how we have a hello, and that is used inside of greeting. So it makes it easier to break down your HTML even more into more reusable components. You can do that, like I showed with the different blocks and stuff in HTML template. It's just a lot more clunky. And you need to make sure that you included those in the right place when it parsed to make sure they're available. And there's just a lot more steps to go through where this is a bit more straightforward when working with that paradigm.
Do you happen to know of something that works well for email templates?
Nothing works well with email templates.
That's the canonically correct answer.
So what does this give you in addition to just being an HTML template thing? You can actually get, I was supposed to say type. You get compile time safety. So you get to pass more types and more arguments into your components. You're not restricted to passing a struct or a map that is the context for that template. You basically can build whatever function signature you want. So you can make it as you need to. It's a lot more similar to just calling a function than needing to think of it as something different. It also gives you some nice tooling when writing these. There is an LSP package specifically for Temple so that your IDE can understand this, automatically format it, and some other nice things. And as you'll see, a lot of the control structures and things is a lot more native Go. So instead of this, it's kind of Go, but with a little bit more fuzziness, you get actual Go. Which when you're going through writing for your application, it's a bit less of a mental shift to just continue writing and doing things the way you do when you're writing app code. So similar to the workflow before with HTML template, instead this time you author it, you generate it, and then you're able to render your components where you need to. I think probably just want to get to some code. I want to switch branches. To kill this. So first I want to show you how I'm generating this. So to make it simple, I used a proc file for a process runner just to run all this for me. So this is the Temple generate command. So it knows to just watch files that have the .temple extension, and then it will automatically convert them to temple.go files so that they're built and ready for when your Go app builds to have the components available. So let's go look at what layout looks like, but as a temple package. Nope, I don't want the ugly one yet. We'll look at the ugly one in a minute. So here we have a temple function. And again, it's just HTML. There's nothing funky, like even with JSX, there's funky things you need to remember. Like you can't use class, you have to use class name, that kind of stuff. That doesn't exist here. You just write normal HTML. But you have, similar to the other templates, a mustache language for inserting your content into these templates. So here they just decided to use one curly brace instead of two. And that's the only difference. Then to get into a little bit of how these can be nested, because you're going to be doing a lot more of that in Temple than maybe you did in HTML template. This children ... is clearly borrowed from React. But it just makes it easier to remember that this is where children of this component get stuck. And this @ sign with what looks like a function signature or function call after it is how you would call a function or call another component inside of so this renders this nav component. Relatively straightforward. And then down here you'll see, similar to the other template, we have an if. But now it is a normal Go if. This gets translated directly into the Go code you would expect. So no like truthy, falsy, this is not normal Go, this is if as you expect in Go. The other thing you can do now is write more complicated expressions. So I am able to get the current user and call a method on that struct. I don't have to pre-build that in the context. I don't have to do any work ahead of time. I just get to call my Go code kind of as I expect.
How does it know that the word if there is go rather than just like, I wanted to have some text?
So there is a generate. So when I was showing you there that it's running a generate process to turn this into Go code. So Temple itself is more this command line thing, but it turns that file I was just showing you into an actual Go file.
What,
That does this.
what I meant was there's like, you had the word sign out in the tags, but then you also had the word if, and I was just wondering like, how does it know? What's the syntax to differentiate like, this is text that goes inside the tag versus this is something imperative.
So paraphrase, what if I wanted to literally put just that exact if statement as a paragraph content of like in a code block in this page? Is there like an escape that you have to do?
So this Go code stuff always has to be on its own line. So it knows that if you're starting with an angle bracket, that it's starting strings of HTML. And there is a specific syntax, which I can probably get to faster here.
So like text has to be on the same line as the HTML, and if it's on a new line, it's expected to be either HTML or Go. Okay.
Yeah, you can use the mustache to insert content and strings where you need to inside of the HTML. But for the things like control statements, like you can use if else, switch, for loops, all as regular Go. They just always have to be that line that is quote normal Go must be on its own line and not also contain something with angle brackets. You can put just some raw Go in there, and that's what it uses double curly braces for. And the other thing that's cool is outside of these temple functions, whatever normal Go you want. So if you want, there's a helper function you want to write, you just func whatever it is and write your own function right there in the file where you need it. So outside of the special temple functions, code is just Go.
I also noticed that as current user passing in a context. But I didn't. I don't understand where the context is coming from.
Pretty sure that's just passed in as argument. I think it just knows about the normal, like another standard library talk that I don't know what's happened is context. It's just kind of passed around everywhere.
That might be a magic variable in temple
It's
function.
just kind of magically passed in there because when you render these, context is required. And this isn't, the thing that's confusing is what I'm talking about context here is not what I was talking about context for HTML template. That was something we built 100% custom. That was usually a map past the template. This is an actual type called context that follows the request all the way through and is used for handy things like if the user cancels it, we can kind of cancel it, and passing data around a request is what it's used for. But it's a different standard library talk.
Yeah, so it's probably like in the generated stuff, we can probably find that context.
Here are these one. So here's the render. And here's the call to render. So this comp is the component, the temple component. And the one thing it is passed is context, which is a Go context struct that is extracted from the request that Echo passes along with the request that details specific to that request.
There's a significant downside to that in that you lose accessing values from context is much more expensive than just reading things from a struct or a map. And also you lose all your type. You kind of like, you don't really lose it, but it becomes much more wishy-washy with types when you have values in context. Like it's an interesting trade-off that they made where there is no arbitrary data here that you can pass other than a context.context.
It is like the other data gets passed to this temple component. I should show that. Because you get to pass, like I talked about before, the function you want.
So it's doing the type safety by having the wrapper functions. The
So,
user gets.
this is where you get the type safety. Is this views.render page? Render page is a component. Here's my component, views index content.
Yeah, okay.
And it takes a thing that fully type safe checked all the way through, and it returns a thing that then gets rendered. So it's kind of this two-step process where you pass it the values you want, and then later on when you actually want bytes of HTML, that's when this gets called. And it
Okay.
gets past the context. That is magically available then in your templates, like I was using it. But you get to pass earlier in that first call that creates the component, you could say, whatever data you want, and it's fully type safe.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. I totally forgot about that. I'm not thinking in this two-phase rendering system
Yeah.
that you're in. Yeah, okay, it makes more sense.
And it is kind of hard to talk about these two packages, one right after the other, because they do have these subtle quirks. Ones that I think in a lot of cases make Temple easier to use.
It's significantly easier to use. But I mean, like, but that's the point though. I think the point of Temple is to say, if you want to make anything that's usable to the, like, we have a certain amount of standard of usability when it comes to web apps right now. And Temple is built with that in mind.
Mhm.
The HTML templates in Go was made for like the most static website you could possibly generate. Like it was literally built for Go Playground.
Yeah, it's
So-
just like the bare minimum of what they want to support that technically does the job, right?
Yeah, it's 100%. So like, you're like, yeah, they don't align. It's like, but this is easier to use because it has the tooling you need to do your job. So I think then the popularity of Temple speaks for itself. It really is, I think, a first class third-party tool for this use case.
To talk about where I came to from this, because when I started playing with Go 10 years ago, I was coming from mostly working with Ruby and Python, and they have ridiculously flexible templating language. Maybe too flexible. Anything to an almost absurd degree. Sometimes they're used that way for dumb reasons. So even back then, I was writing basically a harness for myself on top of HTML template to make it more flexible so that I knew I could put partials of HTML where I needed them to be to make sure that my func map had everything I needed in it. And it is just a lot. Kind of felt like it maybe should have been built in, kind of shouldn't, because it got to be a lot. Temple solves all of those problems in ways that just take a little bit of time to get used to some of these quirks. Like I'm even so used to this double render thing, I forgot to mention that it is a thing that you build your component and then you render it. Probably now I can show you some of these horrifying Go files. So here's maybe a more simple example of just a component. So here I have an errors component. It's for rendering a map of string of errors. Say the user submitted something wrong. They got their password wrong. And it is, at the end of the day, checking this map, putting out a bit of HTML. It turns into this. Now we see a normal function. The only thing that's really special here, like we're still in the same package, we're still importing Temple, and then there's this Temple runtime. That is a small bit of runtime and functions it uses for stuff only in this file. And you get this amazing file of really hard to read random numbers. Fundamentally, all this is doing is a lot of checking for nil and error with a custom built way of concatenating strings using as little memory and as much speed as possible. I just wanted to show you because they're kind of fun to read through, but I've never had to actually look at one of these to actually debug something. And some of that comes with the developer tooling as well. Like there's an LSP, and if the generator detects you did something wrong while authoring your component, it tends to give you a relatively nice error message that makes it easy to figure it out. You don't have to dig through this mess.
So does it type check the HTML as well?
It treats the HTML stuff as just strings. So if you messed up and didn't put an end tag there, type checking isn't going to catch that. I think the generator or the LSP will do that because it has linting and formatting built in.
Okay, so it does give you like similar protections to what you would get if you were.
If you're using all of the tools, yes, you get all those protections.
So maybe you'll get to this too. I'm curious with this intermediate step. Every time there's, this is how Go Embed used to be, right? Go Embed was like before there was the embed package, there were 6 ideas of embed. All of them involved some code gen steps, and all of them were difficult for like the process of like who does the building, when does the building happen? Do you like commit the building those files and commit them into the repo? Like how do you ensure that somebody didn't change and then forget to regenerate before they committed to the repo so that their change didn't actually take effect? So I'm curious, I'm sure there's no right answer with this. What do you typically do to ensure that, like that classic example, someone goes in, they change the Temple files, commit it to the repo, and never generated like another thing, like because that's a separate step?
I haven't used this in like a serious work context, but stuff that I do, I always just commit it all because I like the idea of I could pull the thing and build the thing
I agree with that.
without having to run something else. Other teams might have other ideas. Some people hate the idea of committing generated code.
Disagree with that. Put it in there.
I-
Yes.
That's what it's.
I don't mind it there at all, and I rather like the idea of pull and build just works.
Yeah.
You don't need to commit the generate file. Go generate and go build.
No.
Yeah.
You generate, you put all the generated code. Okay, I didn't realize you were gonna spark
Let's
off.
take it outside.
Oh, Lord.
Get the gloves on.
It can be a contentious topic that teams will debate forever.
Trying to fight while holding a tiny baby
Yeah.
is either cheating or everyone.
That is largely what I wanted to get to, because I wanted this to be mostly probably talk forever if I wanted to get into the nitty gritty, but that's the main gist of it. And like the pros and cons of both, I guess I could do. HTML template is still fine, it still gives you everything you need. If what your app is it needs like a page or two as the admin, I wouldn't reach for anything else. And just use what's built in and make it work. But if you're building an app, you're gonna be rendering multiple pages. You might be doing something slightly more fancy and have HTMX or something involved. Temple, once you get used to it, it's significant.
That's the only way I've seen to do HTMX with Go, so.
What's the like dependency tree that comes with it? Is it a pretty hefty install or is it pretty light? Like if you looked at your Go mod for this, do you have a lot of stuff or just a couple of things? So,
Temple's not,
well, who knows how much of
Temple
this
itself
is?
isn't massive.
Temple's
I don't
not,
think.
Temple, the CLI or the tool itself's not gonna be in your Go mod. What you're gonna have is the wrappers for the, like, it's not gonna.
So like, yeah, okay. This all might be coming with your web framework.
Most
not.
of this comes for Echo.
Okay.
I think Temple really only needs itself because like what is built into your app is
Right.
the component functions itself and the small runtime bits it needs and the functions it needs to run your component, which is the small part of Temple. The CLI is the chunky bit.
That's great, yeah, 'cause sometimes these tools are like, oh, you can do it, but you need, you add this like these huge libraries or these other runtime dependencies.
It's pretty well self-contained. It's another reason why it's really nice. And I think works well with like the HTMX and stuff, because you can keep your app super lightweight. Which is kind of like the point of like HTMX in general is like, why do you need anything hefty on the front end? Just like serve it up on the backside. So it's I think I've enjoyed it for the almost no exposure I've had to it. Nothing like you.
Well, it honestly, like, other than being weird, it's not like, it seems like it has some pretty good abstractions, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's not overly throwing in all.
It's been well thought out and it knows that people writing Go are going to gravitate towards the standard library. So a lot of what it does is all the sharpen HTML template and work for like HTMX and a lot of the nice new things. Because like HTMX lets us who like to be backend devs get a lot of that fancy front end stuff for very little work. And I think the ability to keep all the state on the server to a large degree is just a big win. So for them, and for those, when I say HTMX, is that going over anyone's head? I don't want to just use something people haven't heard of. Okay. It's the fancy thing where it's not having to do a full refresh. It's just rendering chunks of the template.
Oh, library, right? Browser standard, it's just
No, it's essentially the idea,
framework.
like this isn't exactly how it works, but the idea is your request just pass back HTML code that can be browser side rendered because it's just updating the file itself. That's like not how it works, but that's the thought behind it.
Yeah, let me delete this. So
Exactly,
notes from your documented app, the ones you just gave me, and then.
exactly.
I think it's almost a prototype standard.
Yes,
They are proposing bits of the standard to see if they'll go for it, which would be really nice.
There's one guy on the Chrome team that just doesn't want anything useful to ever happen.
Just one?
There's one guy in particular. He opposes everything that would be helpful or useful.
Is he the guy who thought web components would be useful?
His name is Jake Archibald. He does a whole ton of great stuff. Like you'll see him, you'll find him in blog posts. He's a really smart guy, does a lot of really useful stuff. You'll come across things that are amazing, but he just like hates the idea of HTML being useful.
It's like the example of where I used it in here. So I switched back to my branch with HTML template just because it's easier for me to find and show. But here on body, I put this HX target, which just points to the main content section. This swap saying I wanted to swap the inner HTML. And boost basically just says if you're an A tag or a form, use HTMX. And this inherited extra bit says everything below this obeys these rules as well. And just links start swapping to that chunk of the page instead of doing a full page reload to go there. And the interesting hack I did to avoid, you can render the whole page if you want and have HTMX just select a chunk of it. It's more efficient if you don't render stuff you don't have to. So I have if is HTMX. So this says which of those defined blocks I want to be my layout. And so in the default case, that's base that you saw in.
So HTMX requests don't even care if like the responses you give it start with HTML tags. Like they're just like give me something that
It
looks
does need
like
to be
HTML.
HTML.
But it doesn't have to like
HTML.
start with it doesn't have
It
to be
doesn't
an
have to be a
document,
full.
like an actual HTML valid document.
No, it's not a full document.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you give me something that is HTML that I can find the thing I'm looking for in it, I'll use that.
So let me see if I can.
Amazing.
So let's see. So if I click on this
That
now.
makes me actually think about building a website. I'll still never do it. but I'm thinking about
What
it.
I'm thinking about.
So if you look at what this got as a response, this is literally just the chunk that is this recipe. It doesn't need everything that's there. And even if I click back to home, it just renders the middle chunk that goes in this card box thing I have here. So you can get much fancier with it where you're pulling stuff from different form inputs on the page and sending that as data along to make it work. But
You played with Data Star?
I've looked at it, but I haven't even played like written code with it.
What is that? I asked the
Have you heard of Alpine JS?
where to go meet him.
It's
Yes, I probably haven't heard of it.
It's like this idea where you send back the HTML,
Mhm.
but it can stream everything over a server sent event. So it like tags the HTML with where it is. It has a little bit of like jQuery like attribute or like view like attribute tags to similar to that, but it's just like it's high performance. Like you could create a 3D game with it or render like a live updating spreadsheet that updates 60 frames a second, or it's like it's high performance HTML.
but you get it with also it also adds more to the functionality you can do, but you can get a lot of that functionality with just like meta tags and declarative stuff in your HTML as opposed to writing 3 megabytes of React. Some of that you can implement with HTMX too. HTMX has server-side events and WebSockets plugins that you can use for working with it that I've used before. But Datastar is like, this is the way.
Really cool. Yeah, front end is so complicated. Since we're at a Go, knowledge degree, like, I'm so glad I'm a Go developer. Because every time I wade into like the cesspool of front end, it's like, Brandon and I were talking this before, like with other languages, like you haven't even figured out like your standard tools. There's like 600 ways to do everything, and not to mention the garbage of the language itself. So
I think the testament is like, you use Claude with Go,
I know.
and it
Claude
produces
handles
Go
that.
code that's as good or better than what you would write.
Yeah.
Then the moment you're like, add a button in a web page, like,
yeah,
I mean, Claude does write my front ends. That doesn't mean I understand front ends. Like,
or that they're good front ends.
or that they're, yeah.
like every time you ask it to write a button, it's got a different style.
Just
I would
because
never
it's
know.
write a
I
better
never
front
checked
end
the
than me
HTML or
doesn't mean it's a
CSS.
good front end.
No, but like it'll be like one button blue and rectangular, and like the next button circular and red.
That's fine for me if I can click the buttons. That's
My
better
day
than
job
I
is
do.
16-year-old Rails app, and bits of it we are not ever converting to anything else. But HTMX is lovely. I can make an old, slow dashboard that everybody has to use and we cannot change actually feel fast to people by changing almost nothing. Really nice.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll finish up here. So thank you.